You're 2 minutes early.
It says
Yeah, I think
12:59 on mine.
I think we should wait till a minute after or so, just to.
Yeah. That's fine. So the cool thing about being in the office is I've got 3 screens now, so really gonna be grabbing I was already grabbing the wrong mouse. I was like trying to touch this one. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be intense, but
Hey, Dan, I don't see anybody from the city yet, do you?
I'm sorry, I've got it on everyone. I do not. No, I don't see it. I know they'll be coming though.
Okay. When I get to 101, we'll call to order and have Dan take attendance.
Okay.
Dan, I have 101. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and if you'd go ahead and take attendance, please.
Sure. Can we have everyone who's on the call just go around and I'll be recording that? I'm Dan Olson. I'm a CMAP staffer.
Dan,
Eugene Williams, Council of Mayors.
Tom Rickard, King County, representing the counties.
Tom Kelso, IDOT.
Angela Manning Hardeman representing CMAP.
Christina Bader representing CTA.
This is Heather Mullins representing the Regional Transportation Authority.
Holly Waters, Vectra.
Dan, I think that's all the committee, and there's still nobody from the city, so we're just going to proceed without them.
Okay. Sounds good.
React with pace.
Yep.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
All right. We have no agenda changes. The only announcement I have is when we get to number 4, first thing we need is a motion to untable it. Then after we untable it, Angela's going to give a little discussion on both proposals, and then we'll ask for motions to approve one of those. That's all the announcements we have. Does anybody have any corrections to the minutes?
No.
The last meeting. Since there are no corrections, the minutes stand approved as presented. I've done research that we do not need to do roll call on that approval of minutes.
Okay.
Now on 4.0, the 22 UWP committee schedule, I need a motion to untable this from last meeting.
Tom Rickert moves to untable.
And I need a second, please.
I second Angela Manning.
Thank you, Angela. Dan, I do need a roll call now of the members. You want me to do it?
Why don't you take the lead? I'm writing it down.
I'll do. Tom Kelso votes yes. Angela Manning.
Yeah.
Bill Benea, CDOT, not present. Christina from CTA.
Yes.
Mayor Williams.
Yes.
Tom Rickert.
Yes.
Holly Waters.
Yes.
Tom from Pace. I thought Tom was there once. Heather from RTA.
I was muted. Sorry. Thank you.
Heather
Present.
from RTA.
Yes.
Phil from CDOT. We're right now making a motion to untable 4.0 on the agenda. You can vote yay, nay, or abstain.
Tom, can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
We're in the middle of voting on untabling 4.0, which we tabled last week. After we untable it, we're going to have a discussion on it and then have a motion to approve one of the agendas. So
Okay.
you're the last one that hasn't voted yes, no, or abstain.
I vote yes for untabling.
Okay, that motion carries 9-0 then. Angela, if you want to lead us with the discussion you had planned, we'd appreciate it.
Sure. Good afternoon, committee. If at your place, you should have a copy of the 2021 UWP call for projects memo. This year, obviously, it's a little different based on the conversation that we had at the prior meeting in September. What I've outlined for you in this memo that is a little different is two options we wanted to discuss at the meeting. One thing I did commit to doing was getting to you the earmarks, and it's my understanding that the earmark for FY22 is unchanged. If you've looked at the federal legislation, FAST Act was extended for a year with the earmark remaining at the FY21 level. So there is no increase in our earmarks this year. The two plans that we talked about at the prior meeting was a schedule with a competitive program and a schedule without a competitive program. I've had conversations with several of you about that prior to the meeting. What I tried to outline in here was just some options for conversation with a schedule. So if you read through the memo at the very end, you'll see the two schedules. Also included in the memo, if whether we decide to do a competitive or not program, is just kind of the core themes we like to see integrated as part of the work that we do in the fiscal year. So if you look through the memo, you'll see the standard, I want to say it's 5 or 6 provisions that we look for in the work that we will perform in the fiscal year. So let me just talk quickly about the two proposals. I'm trying to find it in my email here. The two options that we present is obviously one without, I'm looking at an interesting memo. I don't see it. Okay, we talked about a program in which there was a competitive program. Last year, I believe what we had available was a little bit over $450,000 of federal funding that we dedicated to the competitive program. And so if our funding is the same and everyone submitted their standard core proposals, that is the amount that would be available for FY22 for the competitive program. And with the match, that would be close to, I believe, about $600,000. If we were to not have a competitive program this year, we need to make some decisions on what to do with that funding. So one of two of the proposals I included in the memo, and simply just points for discussion. Obviously, the committee can make a decision to do something different. One was just an equitable distribution of the funding, and I believe the number I quoted in the memo was $68,000. Another option would be to distribute the competitive funding based on the percentage that each of our programs made up of the general funding of the program. So whatever weighted percentage your agency represents as part of total funding, you would get that percentage of the competitive funding as part of your core funding. So those were two proposals I put on the table for consideration. Open the floor for questions about it. But that's generally what the two programs look like, and the timelines are included in the memo.
Hey, Angela, this is Tom. I had someone that was concerned that by voting on the schedules today, that we're deciding whether we're going to do an equitable distribution or a percentage. We are not doing that today, correct? That's not our intention.
So the committee can decide today that they would like to explore how the distribution of that excess funding happens. That can happen at the time we submit our core proposals if there is no competitive program. If there is a competitive program, then the thought would be that that funding goes towards competitive projects. But that decision does not need to be made today unless, I mean, if we pick to have a competitive program, then the decision is made basically.
Yeah, and I don't think, if we don't have it on the agenda, I don't think we can vote on it today.
Well, it's part of the memo, so it's a discussion point.
Okay, does anybody have any questions at this point for Angela? Okay, to make it easier, let's.
Sorry, I do have a question.
I was trying to unmute myself.
Yeah.
I just have a few comments that, you know, expressed some concern about moving away from not doing a competitive program for FY22 at the last meeting. And we've had some time to talk about that a little bit more internally, and really our position hasn't changed on that. We had mentioned at the last meeting that we're a little concerned about moving away from the pot of money that really lends itself to more of a performance-based programming and funding, as opposed to the core pot of money, which is more by formula, essentially, as it's looking like. We're also worried about the pattern that this is setting and the path that we're going down, that the competitive funding has been reduced in recent years, and now it's being eliminated completely, potentially, for FY22, and we're worried what the future might be for the competitive pot of money. I know there was talk that there is plan on bringing it back. It's just an option this coming year because of the reduced time frame that you have, but it's still concerning for us, and those really haven't changed, and I've discussed them internally, and that's still our position.
All right, thank you, Heather. Does anyone else have any comments at this time?
I have a question. So it says in the memo that the excess funding or the competitive program funding would be distributed amongst the 7 agencies, including CMAP. If I'm just stating this, I guess, to make sure I'm understanding correctly, if we do a percentage allocation based on the budget, I mean, CMAP gets 80% of the funding broken down.
Oh, like I said, I was just presenting options, but to Tom's point, there's been conversations he's had where there are agencies who would like to explore an option that's different than the 2 I proposed. What I was attempting to do is just put something out there for consideration. I didn't want to submit a memo where there was no thought into that process at all. But I think it's the city of Chicago specifically who wanted to put out a different formula for consideration and for us to talk about at the December meeting. So they were just options. They're not etched in stone.
Okay, I guess I just wanted to understand. So CMAP is included as a funding receiver in the division of funds.
So yes, we are included in it, but once again, it depends on which formula we pick. If it's equally distributed, then yes. If it's a percentage of the total pot, yes. If it's a formula that CDOT is recommending, yes. So we would be a part of all the equations.
Any
And
other questions?
If we,
Go ahead.
if we have a suggestion for a different type of formula, we should reach out to you before the December meeting.
I think,
And it sounds
yes,
like,
definitely, so that I can outline it in a memo for the committee. I would say get those recommendations to me so I can formally put them in a memo so that we can have a discussion at the December meeting and talk about it and make a decision on what's the right approach. But I think what we've got to decide today, which predicates what happens in December, is if we're going to have a competitive program or not. If there's a competitive program, then the rest of that conversation is a moot point.
yeah, I guess for us, it was part of the decision-making process was what is the proposal for distributing the funds. So I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah,
what
I
that
didn't,
is.
I don't think,
At least what's on the table.
yeah, I didn't think I was in a position to solely make that decision. So I wanted to put, again, some thought into two options. CDOT came back with a third option. And I would assume after the conclusion of this meeting, there's going to be other options explored. So if you get them to me, I can put them in a memo. We as a group can collectively decide on what we want that distribution to look like.
This is Tom Rickert. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the counties are also one of the participating agencies. So I want to at least mention that. You know, at this point in time, you know, I don't have a problem not funding the competitive program for 22, but I think that we need to at least put some wording, or ultimately whatever decisions made, we need to also recognize in that decision that we want to make sure the competitive program comes back in 23.
Anyone else at this time?
Tom, can I add a comment to the
You
conversation?
sure can.
So the other thing that I want to just remind folks of is that we've been in conversations with FHWA about the timeline and the 5-year contracts for these competitive proposals as well. So one of the things that we want to do is, if we are to take a pause on this, is figure out how we can more effectively spend those resources so that they aren't sort of taking 5 years to execute. So part of the conversation, should we choose to not do the competitive program this year, and I suppose even if we did choose to do the competitive program this year, is to figure out how we can reduce those 5-year contracts as well, because we want to make sure that we're spending our money. Oftentimes we'll allocate these competitive projects and then they'll hang out for a couple of years before they get executed. So we need to talk through as a committee, you know, what are some of those barriers? How can we tee these up to work faster? Are there things that CMAP can be doing to help execute those contracts in different ways that we've done in the past as well?
Thank you. Any other comments at this minute?
Yeah, CTA just wants to say for the record that we've always appreciated the transparency of the competitive program in its selection of projects, and we just remain invested in its relaunch for fiscal year 2023. We'd like to be an active partner in the reconfiguration of the program, and it's just important to us that it remains a viable part of UWP's future.
Thank you, Christina.
So I did have a conversation with CTA. They did reach out to me wanting to make sure that the UWP partners are a part of the redesign of the competitive program. Again, absolutely. I think that's been outlined in the memo, and it's a group effort, it's a committee effort, and it would be done jointly with everyone.
Is something for the December meeting that's a possibility, like a proposed timeline for how that would work?
I actually had prepared one, and I'm happy to share with I didn't, because we were voting, I didn't include it in the memo, but I do have some thoughts, and I think I actually shared it with you, Christina, on how that would work out. But again, I didn't include it in the memo because that wasn't the focus of this particular meeting. So yes, I can prepare something for that meeting.
Any other comments? I think the only way to proceed is, and I want to be clear, we are just voting on competitive schedule or non-competitive. In December, we can discuss if we have no competitive, how it's going to get distributed, and then we can handle that as separate proposals on a separate vote. I think we're mixing up apples with the oranges and we're going to end up with nothing. So at this time, I'd ask for motions to approve Schedule 1, we'll call the schedule with non-competitive. Schedule 2 will be the schedule with competitives. Do I have a motion for either?
I'll make a motion that we move forward with no competitive. This is Tom Rickert.
Tom Rickert, do we have
I'll
second?
Second, Holly Waters.
Thank you, Holly. Okay, I'm going to do a roll call on this again. Holly Waters,
Yes.
Tom Radak,
Yes.
Heather Tabbert Mullins,
No.
Tom Rickert,
Yes.
Mayor Williams,
Yes.
Christina from CTA,
Yes.
Bill CDOT,
Yes.
Angela Manning Hardeman,
Yes.
and the chair will also vote yes. I think that motion approves 8-1, so we will continue on planning for December with the non-competitive schedule. We'll plan on a big discussion on distribution of excess funds. And that's all we have for that. We'll look forward to doing that in December. I can't wait. Dan, you're going to give us a little update on the fiscal year 21 first quarter reports.
Yeah, no, so we don't have an update yet because we just finished quarter one. So my only update is to just remind folks, if you haven't submitted your quarterly reports, to get those into Sherry as soon as possible. We usually try to get them in by the 31st of the month following the end of the quarter. So, and we can discuss any expenditure stuff at our next meeting.
Thanks, Dan. We have two presentations today, one from McHenry County and one from Lake County.
Yep.
Dan, can you queue up our McHenry
Yes.
County partners, please?
That is what I practice. I'm going to do that right now. So just give me a second. Let's see. There's a lot of folks on today. Ryan, I'm going to be giving you control right now. Here we go. Okay, should be good.
All right, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, thank you, Dan. My name is Ryan Peterson. I'm a transportation planner for the McHenry County DOT. Today, I'm going to be talking about our McHenry County transit plan that was funded in part with UWP funds. I first want to preface this by saying that I've only been with the county DOT for about 3 months now, and this plan is going on about 3 years old. I don't have all of the insight that someone who was a part of the plan, but I have done a fair amount of research and have spoken with people who were involved with it. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a good overview of this plan. So just a brief overview of McHenry County. We're located about 50 miles northwest of Chicago, population of 307,000. Our largest city, Crystal Lake, just under 40,000. And we have 3 transit services, the Metro UP Northwest, 4 PACE routes, and our NC Ride Dial-A-Ride. And I'll get into a little bit more about those 4 transit services later in the presentation. So our transit plan. So McHenry County went about updating their transportation plan in 2014, and they created their 2040 transportation plan. Within that transportation plan, there were a lot of transit initiatives that they identified. But one of the things they also identified was that the need for an update to their transit plan, which hadn't been updated for quite some time. So McHenry County applied for and was granted about $160,000 in UWP funds in 2017 to go about studying and creating a new transit plan. And so they focused on 7 main topics, which were to analyze countywide transit growth potential and demographics, survey of current transit users and non-users about their transit preferences and needs, conduct public and private stakeholder focus group meetings, analyze survey data and develop a spectrum of potential service options, estimate the cost and potential ridership of all identified service options, assess the feasibility of utilizing various funding mechanisms, and finally, to prepare a plan with service recommendations and implementation strategies. And so they went out for an RFQ process, the county did, and they chose Trans Systems as their consultant and partner on this transit plan. And so there were 3 main reports that Trans Systems put together to kind of focus the different topics of the transit plan as a whole. The first being the existing and future conditions report, which provided current and projected demographic, employment, and transit information that was used to help kind of look at the current transit trends and then develop new infrastructure and recommend moving forward. The second was the public engagement report, which kind of outlined all of the different public engagement tactics and strategies throughout the study and the eventual report. And then finally, the concept discussion report was organized around 4 distinct concepts that were proposed for the future transit network in McHenry County. And so taking a look at the the current conditions at the time of the study. So focusing on the fixed route and the demand response. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have 4 fixed route transit routes within McHenry County. We have the 806, which is the red line on the eastern portion of the county. We have the 807, which is the purple line going between McHenry and Woodstock. And then we have the 808 line, which is that blue line going from Crystal Lake to Harvard. We also have the 550 route, which is the purplish line going from Crystal Lake and actually goes all the way south to Elgin. And then we also have our MC Ride service, which is our dial-a-ride program. And so the green areas on the map here show the general public coverage area for our MC Ride service, meaning that anyone within those areas can get a ride or end a ride from those zones. And then we also have our beige areas on the map, which represent our coverage area for our seniors and individuals with disabilities. So anyone who fits those demographics can get a ride from those zones. And then we also have the black and white points on the map, which represent some destination points. So we wanted to add some extra coverage as well. So anyone can get a ride or, start a ride or end a ride from those destination points as well. And as you can see, there are a few outside of our county. So it links really well with Lake County and the other counties surrounding us. And then we have our Metro service. So we have 7 stations along the UP Northwest line. We have 2 branches. The main branch going all the way to Harvard, the way in Woodstock, and then twice in Crystal Lake, and then Cary and Fox River Grove. And then from the from the Crystal Lake downtown station, there's a branch going north to McHenry as well. Metro is by far our biggest transit service with about 3,200 boardings per day, which was obviously pre-COVID, but moving a fair amount of people throughout the county and into the downtown areas. So one of the biggest aspects of this, and rightfully so, was our public engagement. At the start of the study, there was a survey circulated. It was available in both English and Spanish. And the online survey was advertised during all transit presentations during the course of the study. It was posted at all the Metro stations. It was included in seat drops on PACE fixed routes and the MC Ride buses operating in the county. It was posted on social media and then sent to all of our stakeholders and organizations throughout the county. Paper surveys were also available at all outreach events and at select locations, including almost all of the libraries within the county. There were just over 1,000 surveys completed, including 19 in Spanish. And then in May of 2018, the consultants and DOT staff met with Metra and PACE. A few of the main points taken away from those were that there were new planned station and parking projects throughout the county at Cary, Pingree Grove, and Woodstock. Metra also identified that there are very minimal number of reverse commuters going into McHenry County, which is something to look at moving forward as an opportunity similar to what Lake County implemented with their reverse commuter program. And then with PACE, they mentioned that the fixed route ridership in McHenry County has been flat or declining since the last plan, but that's not exclusive to McHenry County. A lot of the collar counties are seeing the same effects as well. And then there were several stakeholders that were identified. The list here is available on the left. There was a meeting at the Continuum of Care to End Homelessness board meeting to talk with those who are homeless and low income. A meeting was held at the Center for Independent Living offices in McHenry to speak with individuals with disabilities. Another meeting was held at the McHenry County Township Senior Center in May of 2018 to talk with senior citizens and their transit needs. A discussion transit plan was held at the McHenry County Planners Forum in May of 2018 to talk with not only county planners, but municipal planners as well on transit gaps and needs. And then finally, government officials were engaged in June of 2018 at the Council of Governments in Crystal Lake. And the final meeting was held speaking to college-age students in June of 2018 at the McHenry County Administration Building. MCDOT staff and our consultants also attended a variety of community events to get a better geographic and demographic perspective on transit within the county, where we're deficient and how we can upgrade on those as well. And then after 3 concepts were drawn up by our consultants, they were brought to focus groups with 3 different meetings held in August of 2018. 13 people attended these meetings, and they were given, the consultants were given recommendations and insights on the different proposed. And as I mentioned, there were a number of different concepts proposed by the consultants to kind of guide our transit network moving forward. The first concept was to increase demand response service and decrease fixed route service. The second concept was to focus fixed routes on the highest demand areas. Concept focus our fixed routes on local service rather than long distance service. And finally, concept 4 was to increase fixed route service and decrease demand response service. So in addition to all these concepts, our consultant provided cost estimates as well to kind of give us a gauge of what each of these concepts would actually cost in the long run. And then in the bottom right here, it also shows the coverage area for each of these concepts. So it talked about how many of the large employers within McHenry County will be covered by this concept, how many of the schools, big boxes, and so on and so forth. And so after review of these 4 concepts, there was actually not one preferred concept that actually fit all of the needs of our stakeholders. And so we kind of took the best aspects of those 4 concepts and built a preferred concept as well. So if you think about the preferred concept as being the final transit network in 2030, the consultant put together 3 stages. And then within those stages, there were 4 categories of recommendations on how we can finally get to that endpoint of that transit network. So the first stage was from 20 to 2020. The map on the right here shows the suggested transit network for those years. So some of the general recommendations that were put forward by the consultant were creating distinct signage on the MC Ride program to create visibility when they're traveling around the county. Translating all of the brochures into Spanish, not only for the MC Ride program, but all brochures handed out for transit within the county. Putting bike racks on all fixed routes for the PACE buses. For the demand response recommendations, they wanted us to create some service corridors similar to Pulse service that PACE runs, but for more rural areas and a wider scope of geographic range. For the fixed route recommendations, they recommended eliminating parts of the 806, the 807, and the 808, which are our 3 lowest performing PACE routes, and also creating a Harvard circulator route, which you can see in the top left hand side of the map in purple. And then finally, for the metro recommendations, they recommended consolidating the J, K, L, M, and N fare zones to decrease costs for riders. So the second stage, which was from 2021 to 2024, for the demand response, they recommended some technology upgrades, including allowing electric payments and mobile scheduling and matching applications for the MC Ride, and then also extending the MC Ride service for seniors and individuals with disability to the entire county. So as you can see, the entire county is encompassed in that beige color, meaning that those within those demographics would be able to get a ride from any point within the county. For the fixed route recommendations was to add a Cary to Fox River Grove circulator route you can see in the southeast corner, which is that orange line. And then they recommended the county subsidize all fares on any fixed route to either be free or largely reduced in order to increase ridership and the financial burden for the transit riders using those services. And then finally, for the metro recommendations, they suggested building a new coach yard north of Woodstock in order to increase the amount of trains that can travel on the UP Northwest line. And then finally, the third stage was from 2025 to 2030. The recommendations within the demand response category were to implement TNC and microtransit to supplement MC Ride and services where they can't always reach as efficiently, to expand MC Ride countywide, and to build an additional garage west of Illinois 47 so that buses can get to and from the western portions of our county more efficiently. For the fixed route recommendations, they recommended adding new routes to serve population growth centers. So as you can see, the turquoise line going from McHenry to Fox Lake would meet those needs. And then you have the green line going from Crystal Lake southeast towards Carpentersville. They recommended adding those lines during this third stage. Their next recommendation was to add Saturday service, which was not currently happening at that time. And then finally, the metro recommendations was to extend the McHenry branch to Johnsburg. So as you can see, the northern branch actually extends a little bit further into Johnsburg, and to also add 2 infill stations at Prairie Grove and east of Woodstock to serve some population growth centers there. And then finally, to upgrade existing signal systems and add crossover opportunities to increase the service and access. And so there were, in addition to the infrastructure and route recommendations, our consultant within the plan also provided some proposed route schedules based on predicted demand for those routes, which is based on current and proposed, predicted population growth and transit demand moving forward all the way to 2030. They also included several action items, which were either advice or recommendations on how to implement each stage, which were very helpful, which included proposals for incorporation of innovative technologies or encouragement to form intra and inter-county partnerships as well. And so when it comes to implementation, the county has started working on implementing recommendations within the plan. However, with COVID, that's really thrown a wrench into our plans, and I'm sure a lot of other counties on expanding transit. As we've seen such a decrease in transit, it's hard to plan for the future. But we are working with PACE to hopefully expand technologies, including electronic payments. The RTA has done a great job with the rollout of their Ventra app, and we're hoping that comes to our dial-a-ride service and all of the services that are offered within McHenry County, as well as scheduling apps to make it easier for people to know when the bus is coming and to schedule rides on our dial-a-ride as well. We've also started working internally as a department to improve transit. So the map here on the right shows our proposed MC Ride coverage area. So we not only want to expand it to be countywide for everyone, but we actually are hoping to have any municipality within that has some area within McHenry County to also have their areas within the other counties that they expand outward into, such as Huntley or Barrington Hills. We want them to have coverage as well. In addition, we proposed 7 different points within Kane, Cook, and Lake County to expand that access for those leaving the county and those who want to come into the county. Also launching several social media accounts for our MC Ride program and the types of posts that we make on our current social media pages, in addition to rebranding MC Ride to increase our visibility for that program. And we've also created fare cards that nonprofits and government agencies can actually purchase and give to their residents or clients for them to use for one-way trips in lieu of paying with cash. And with that, once again, thank you for having me today. And I think we might be doing questions after Mike's, but contact information is listed on the screen.
Actually, if folks want to ask questions specific to this presentation, feel free to go ahead now.
Yeah, I guess I just want to make a comment. This is Tom Rickert. I just want to commend McHenry County on their transit planning efforts. I find this to be one of the better local efforts over the last few years. McRide, actually, you've surprised me, and perhaps even the county, McHenry County's even challenging other counties and local agencies to consider what they're able to do to move paratransit and transit efforts forward. I think that there's a lot of positive things that occur at the local level. While you were talking, Ryan, I was thinking just about McRide as well as Pace now for the last few years has been in McHenry County. It wasn't prior. A lot of these local planning efforts I've seen in Kane County over the years, the extension of Metro out to Elburn, the ride in Kane, priority corridors where we're changing land use along certain arterial systems, and bike planning at eightfold. We went from, when I first started with county, 80 miles up to over 600 miles worth of bike trails. So a lot of these local planning efforts, they really hit the ground, and I commend McHenry County on their efforts in the transit area.
Hey, Ryan, Tom from IDOT, how did you pay for that study?
So we were funded in parts, I believe. I'm not positive, but I believe the majority was funded with UWP, about 160,000, and then I believe there were some general funds from the county that were provided as well to fill the gap there. But it was an 80-20 split, so we at least put some of it in, and I'm not sure about the other county portion.
Yeah, thanks. The point I wanted to make, a plan like that's a no-brainer for SPR funds. If some other county's interested in doing it, I think you got about a 99.9% chance of getting the money. Okay, Dan, back to you.
Cool, thanks, Ryan. Mike, I'm gonna pass over, make you presenter now for your presentation. There we go.
Sounds good.
All right, you should be good to go.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks. Thank you, committee, for having us today. My name is Mike Clemens. I'm a manager of transportation planning at Lake County DOT. And very similar to Ryan, I'd like to start out by saying that I was not directly involved in the paratransit market study for Lake County. However, I am going to be involved in the implementation of the study. And so I would like to give proper credit to two staff from Lake County, Ashley Lucas and Emily Carey, who were really the drivers behind this study. But I am involved, as I said, as we move forward towards implementation. So let's see here. So really briefly, obviously this committee knows what paratransit is, but we like to throw this in there, especially for public meetings, so everyone has a baseline of what we're talking about when we talk about paratransit. We're talking about things beyond fixed routes, shared, flexible, on-demand services targeted towards seniors and individuals with disabilities. We have 2 coordinated services right now in Lake County that are open to seniors 60 plus and individuals with disabilities. And there are some general public rides as well. Paratransit planning, study, and operations has been going on for quite some time in Lake County, starting in the 1980s. A coordinated service started in the early 2000s, and then in the mid 2010s is when the paratransit market study really took off. And so, to give a little bit of background, we like to show this slide to show the complexity of service that exists today. So there's something like 41 to 50 non-fixed route options with overlapping services. Some are run by townships, some are run by nonprofits, some are run by human service agencies, some only go to a specific Walmart on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And there's a lot of complexity and variety, and it makes it very hard for the riders to understand the options that are out there. And so that led us to start the paratransit market study. Given that history and the variety of complexity, Lake County DOT engaged a consultant, Nelson Nygaard, to lead this study and to help provide recommendations for improving paratransit service in the Lake County region. The market study was comprised of 4 technical memos, an existing conditions report, strategies and recommendations, a business plan, and an implementation report. And those 4 technical memos comprise the overall final report. So up on the screen is the purpose of this for a sustainable implementable plan for mobility options and targeting those focus groups. Obviously, there may be improvements to other demographics, but that is the focus. And so countywide outreach was conducted throughout the course of the study. This included online surveys, 12 community meetings that had over 250 people in attendance. There were 7 focus group meetings, stakeholder meetings, including meetings with villages and townships. And the bullets on this slide cover the feedback that we heard from the public. A lot of things that I think most people on this committee that are familiar with transportation are familiar with, but really making the service easier to find, understand, and use is something that we heard, and then eliminating gaps, as Ryan talked about with MC Ride as well. So this is a little bit of feedback that we saw from the public. And so the blue is from online surveys, the red is what we heard in person at meetings, but you can see, flexible services and a countywide system is really what people were looking for. As part of the study, a transit propensity index was developed to provide a measure of groups that have the potential to use or are likely to use public transportation in Lake County. This thing looked at densities of population, older adults, individuals with disability, people living with an income less than 150% of the poverty line, households without access to a private vehicle. And this is based on potential use, not necessarily current use. But it does. So what is showing here is areas with denser populations, lower income areas have a higher transit propensity index. So in areas like Waukegan, but that doesn't mean that people in other areas of the county would not use transit. What this showed us, though, is that existing transit services are predominantly concentrated on the east side of the county, and that's where there's more density. We understand that Pace can't have a fixed bus route everywhere. And so we think this shows that where those fixed routes are, at least prior to COVID, those made sense. Obviously, COVID is disrupting nearly everything of our daily lives. So We also partnered with Lake County Partners, which is the county's economic development corporation, and they map the locations of employers in the county with 100 or more employees. Lake County has over 400 employees with more than 100 employees, representing over 70,000 total workers. And in general, the transit system does line up where these larger employers are. And if you'll indulge me for just a second, if I kind of flip back and forth between the transit propensity index and the employment overlay, you can see that they do kind of line up. And so that does make sense. And so the study recommendations were developed in concert with the project study team and stakeholders. Those public outreach efforts informed it. And so recommendations were grouped into a couple of different categories: governance changes, service strategies, and those service strategies are categorized into short, mid, and long-term strategies. So service strategies, they gave some recommendations of what those could be. There could be late night employment pilots, enhanced on-demand service, route deviation for fixed route service, and expansion to a countywide paratransit system. Personal mobility strategies, there was also some other suggestions of van pools, TNCs or a taxi pilot, or a first last mile pilot. And then working with that goal that we heard from the public of trying to make it more user-friendly, a centralized transportation information and trip planning, and a countywide marketing program were some of the other recommendations. And so those variety of service strategies were put into various phases and provided with some various timelines of what they may take to implement. And so the study was completed in April of 2019. And the biggest single recommendation from the study was that a lead agency in the county needs to be identified for paratransit to really be the champion. And so our county board took that recommendation and acted on it. And so listed out here, identify a lead agency, dissolve our coordinated transportation services committee, and create a new Ride Lake County committee that serves a county-wide group. So, excuse me, just a couple months after the final report was published, our county board created an ad hoc committee of the county board to be a lead agency working group with the goal to reach consensus on who would be the most appropriate lead agency to advance paratransit coordination and service improvements in Lake County. And so starting in July of 2019 through July of 2020, that group met a total of 7 times. And I would like to take a second to acknowledge our partners who were really invested in this. In addition to the members of that working group, we also had presentations from our regional partners, including MC Ride, Riding Cane, just to name a few, the RTA, the TMA of Lake Cook, and they're listed out there. So we had a lot of really good presentations to hear how other counties and peer agencies are handling these type of things. And so ultimately, this summer, our lead agency working group sent a recommendation to our county board that Lake County government serve as an executive sponsor in a new countywide service. And so it's a small distinction rather than a lead agency and executive sponsor, but we think it's an important distinction. The idea behind being an executive sponsor is that Lake County government would serve as a leader and a political change agent. But the committee is intended to be made up of agencies that are funding partners that have skin in the game, and that would be working together towards a county-wide coordinated service. So the idea would be that Lake County isn't building and running a new service, but we would need and require buy-in and support from other local agencies. So I should note here, excuse me, that this recommendation was presented to our county board committee, but hasn't yet been presented to the full county board. So as we mentioned, the goal that we heard from the beginning is to make this both the rider's experience and the administration of paratransit better. And so as we're beginning the process to transition to a coordinated countywide service, I wanted to go back to this slide from the market study because we can't lose sight of the rider experience. It's important that we make administrative improvements. There's a lot of things that can be done there, but all of those have to keep in mind the rider experience. And so next steps for us are to set up a meeting with county leadership and PACE leadership. We had previously had a meeting on the books in March of this year. Obviously that didn't happen. And so in the coming months, we will be working to set up a meeting with PACE and county leadership to talk about this new countywide service, have a discussion and get their buy-in, present this recommendation and get approval from the county board. And then we would look to begin this transition to a new countywide service. We have a rough estimate that could take us a couple years to really be operational with a new countywide service, but I guess that depends on a lot of factors that right now we don't have answers to. Of how long is the COVID crisis going to last? What does a return to transit look like? How are budgets impacted? There are a lot of decisions that have to be made along the way. And so with that, if there are questions, I will do my best to answer, but my contact information is on the screen.
Mike, I had a question for you. This is Angela. When I was listening to the presentation from McHenry and also the one on Lake County, the thing that I noticed you two had in common was marketing the services and making it known to the residents of the area. So kind of what's the barriers to that happening? Is it funding? Is it strategy? Kind of what limits that from happening?
I think there's a number of things. I think there isn't one uniform place necessarily to get information on all the existing services that are out there right now. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers is there is good information out there, but it's split and it's stratified across multiple different implementing agencies. The RTA trip planner is good to a point, even on Lake County's own 211 page. There's just a lot of different pages to click through to see all the different services. And so to understand what's really out there and all the available options, I think there is room for improvement.
Thank you.
Mike, I was going to ask, your market survey, did it show the percentage of your population that has a disadvantage in regards to transportation services, the disabled and elderly? Do you recall what that percentage is?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can look into that a little bit more and try to get a response, a better response. I do know that generally speaking, the transit propensity index and where transit services exist today were found to be generally in good locations given the county demographics, but there are some gaps certainly.
Well, I'd just like to make another comment in regards to that aspect. In Kane County, we found that over 3% of our population had a disadvantage in regards to transportation services, and riding Kane has been an excellent service. I think we're, up until COVID, we were averaging probably around 8,000 trips a month, and So I think that this is a very important service. I commend the county moving forward with trying to figure out how to handle this. As a region, and this is outside of UWP funding, we need to continue to figure out ways to fund paratransit. This is a much needed service, and I know about 15 years ago, there was a bunch of us that went down to Springfield and were able to get $20 million annually towards paratransit. We were anticipating some of that would go to the county services that are provided. Those monies were reallocated. So there's still a dire need for funding for paratransit. Obviously, the RTA and their distribution of the federal funds, everything that's come forward today it continues to be funded, but we still need to continue to watch this and grow those services. And so that's just a comment for the region.
Yeah, I would very much agree. And one of the things that we saw, especially over the last several months during the pandemic, is that while Metro, Pace, fixed route transit was down 70, 80, 95%, our paratransit service was only seeing, but 50% reductions. Clearly, these are very important services that people rely on.
Thanks, Mike. Is there any other questions for Mike? No more questions for Mike? Can you hear me, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any more.
Okay, our next meeting, without competitive in our schedule, is scheduled for December 17th. I would suggest if you have ideas on splitting up that funding, that you get them to Angela by the middle of November so everybody has time to discussion. I think it's important, whatever the proposals are, that we get them out to people 2 or 3 weeks before the meeting so they have time to discuss it with their staff and between each other. And Angela or myself, if you wish.
Yeah, and I would just put in.
That being said, is there any public comment at this time?
Tom, just real quickly on that, I would just say I noticed that we didn't have a time on there. I would just propose we do the same time on December 17th at 1 o'clock, but it's up to you.
Yeah, let's just assume we're always going to do 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Since there's no public comment, there's no other business before us, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.